Welcome back to Rewitched, a charmed 1998 rewatch podcast. Join us on our journey as we recap, examine, and critique the series episode by episode from the beginning.
We'll be keeping our podcast spoiler free, so we welcome fans, new and old, to join us in watching and reflecting on one of our favorite shows. Currently, we're on season 4,
I'm your host, Jess Sabanko.
and I'm your host, Mia Sabanko.
Now let's get into this week's episode. This week, we're discussing season 4, episode 9, Muse to My Ears. It originally aired on December 13th, 2001, and had 4.46 million viewers. This was the mid-season finale.
So we begin in the manor in the kitchen and it's nighttime. We see Phoebe is cooking and wearing an apron. She looks so pretty. And Cole walks in and asks where everyone is. And then she rips off the apron and she's wearing like this black dress underneath, and her hair and makeup are all done up. And she says, "Surprise." And he tells her that she looks beautiful. And so she hands him champagne and says, "Thank you. I sent everyone away so we could celebrate." And he said, "What are we celebrating?" She said, "Cole, you're finally human. No more demon means no more obstacles for our relationship. Yay, us." And she clinks glasses with him and drinks, but he just looks down, kind of sad. And Phoebe's like, "That was a toast, and usually after the clinking part, you take a sip." And he nods and is like, "I don't know if sending your sisters away was a good idea. I don't have powers anymore, and I can't protect you if there's an attack." And she says, "Well, my sisters are in calling range, and more importantly, I am in kissing range." And she starts kissing his neck, and he's like, "Phoebe, you don't seem to understand that with the source injured, you might be in more danger than ever before." And she says, "Well, you don't seem to understand that sometimes a girl just needs a night off. Now, is there anything that I can do to help you relax?" And she starts kissing him again, and he says, "Well, that helps a little. Maybe you should just keep doing that." And then he kind of moves away and says, "It's just that without a strong leader, there's anarchy in the underworld." And she's like, "Wow, you're a sweet talker." He says, "Demons who would normally compete for the source's favor." And she finishes his sentence and says, "We'll start banding together to try to take out the source. Honey, you told me this part already." He says, "But I'm not sure you get it. Demons hoping to replace the source will gather factions of followers. And what better way to gain support for your faction than to kill the charmed ones?" And then the timer goes off on the oven, and Cole says that he'll get it and takes it out with no oven mitts and like burns himself pretty bad. And Phoebe's like, "Is it bad? I could call for Leo." And he's like, "No, it's fine. It's just I used to be able to hold fire in the palm of my hands." And she says, "We vanquished half of you. That's a huge adjustment. But I promise you'll figure it out. We'll figure it out together." And she hugs him. And he starts talking about the factions again, and she promises to just worry about them first thing in the morning. And says, "But for now, I want us to join forces." And they start making out.
So, great opening scene. You know how all season I've been kind of talking about like the other sisters displaying Prue's personality traits? Here's Cole displaying a Prue personality trait, only
Oh my
caring
God.
about demons.
Genuinely, he totally is. And it's so funny to see like how much he cares and is like trying to be protective with his human half, and like literally can't I mean, imagine having a guy that cares so much about the safety of your life and the possibility that it's in danger that like he's not even willing to go, have sex with you. Like what guy would do that? Nobody. Like Phoebe's throwing out all the stops here, and he is not falling in.
And it's so funny to me because like I feel like if my mind is really focused on something, like I'm not gonna be able to distract myself with anything else. So I totally get like Cole's vibe here where he's like, no, the demons, the
Yeah,
factions, come on.
genuinely. He's so concerned. It's kind of adorable. However, I can understand the frustration for Phoebe. And like you can tell she's trying so hard to be like supportive while still trying to distract him and get him to stop talking about this crap. Like they have to deal with this all the time. Sometimes a girl just needs her boyfriend.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I do like the way she set up this little date night. I think it's very cute. Something I'm going to talk about more, I think, as the episode goes on, because I want to see a couple more scenes before I get into it, is I have two opinions on Cole in this episode. The first is that he has a lot of insecurity around being human, which I think comes from the fact that he didn't truly make this choice. It was kind of like thrust upon him, and he's having a hard time coping with it, which I think is really understandable. And number two, I think he really just underestimates Phoebe's capabilities, which is something I want to talk about more as the episode goes on.
Most definitely. I think those are definitely big things to talk about, especially because him saying things like, "Oh, I don't have powers to protect you if there's an attack." Like, when has she ever truly needed like all your protection? Like, yeah, you help, but she's got her sisters. They are the almighty charmed ones. You know what I mean? Like, even when you were against them, you couldn't win.
Yeah. And I mean, even at times where him and Phoebe were alone, like Phoebe can kind of take him in a fight. Like he's really underestimating just because she doesn't have the active powers that Paige and Piper have, that she can't handle herself if an attack were to occur.
Right. And I definitely like it's kind of a bittersweet, like a negative and positive feeling that it's giving me because, I don't like the way he's underestimating her. Not seeing that feels very like, that man and woman thing that, you know. But I can also understand where it does have a lot to do with just the fact that he's so worried that something might happen to her, which of course is adorable and respectable that he cares that much. But also, yeah, he should be able to acknowledge, like, hey, when have they ever not been able to protect themselves before? You
Yeah.
know? But yeah, we'll definitely see more of this going on throughout this episode.
And then in terms of just other things happening here, obviously the factions thing that he's talking about is something that's going to become a key role in this episode.
Absolutely.
So then we go to like, I think it's a courthouse. I'm not really 100% sure where we are. And we see this man who is practicing a speech. He's saying, "We must join forces with those we've considered our enemies if we are to defeat." And he keeps messing up and getting frustrated with himself and sits down and starts writing again. Then we see this translucent woman in a pale blue dress appear and look at him. And after she does, he stands up confidently and gives this great speech about joining forces. Or at least we're supposed to think it's great. It's very okay, if you ask
Yeah.
me. um, and then this man in a leather jacket walks in clapping. He's like, "I think I can use that." And the politician says, "How did you get in here? What do you want?" And the woman is watching them, concerned. And he says, "Well, as you know, gathering a following requires inspiration. I want your muse." And he looks directly at the woman, who's surprised that he can see her. He blows a kiss, and the congressman is super confused. Then the guy moves his finger, and the woman notices he's wearing the ring of inspiration, which sucks her in. And the congressman starts to leave because he's just really freaked out by this guy, because obviously he doesn't see any of this stuff going on. And then the other guy blinks over to him and says, "I'm doing you a favor, really. There's nothing worse than an uninspired politician." And he puts his hands on his face and burns him to death.
Dear Lord. This poor guy.
No, literally. Also, I kind of forgot how like cool warlock powers are because we haven't seen one in a hot minute.
Yeah. Like I like that I think they keep consistent, the blinking and the face burn we've seen countless times from warlocks, like that's definitely
Yeah.
like a signature thing for them. But yeah, no, I feel very sad for this congressman, but what are you gonna do? Obviously wasn't that important. It died in the first scene. So as we can see, this warlock that's there is obviously starting to gain a following, trying to create a faction, everything that Cole was worried about in the first scene of the show. And we can imagine that these muses are going to be important to this episode.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely see more of the Muse, which I think we're getting the hint here. They are invisible, but for some reason, warlocks can see them. Either that or this ring he has allowed him to see her. One of those two. I guess we'll get more answers on that later on, as well as what the ring of inspiration actually is, I'm assuming.
Exactly. So then we have the theme song, and after that, we move back into the kitchen at the manor, and it's morning time now, and we see Piper pouring coffee while she's on the phone with someone named Bev. And Phoebe walks over and takes the coffee cup right from her hands and starts drinking it. Then Piper hangs up, and Phoebe's like, "Have you seen Cole?" And Piper basically says that he apparently went to run errands, and then she asks her how the date went last night. And Phoebe says that it was only okay. He kept talking about the demonic factions. And Piper's like, well, that's probably because it's easier for him to talk about demons than what's really on his mind. And Phoebe's like, which is? She's like, whether or not you're going to reconsider his marriage proposal now that he's a human. And Phoebe's like, we talked about that, and he's totally fine with it. He gets it. And Piper nods, but doesn't look super convinced. And Phoebe's like, why? Did he say something to you? She's like, no, but he doesn't have to. It's written all over his face. And truth be told, it's rare for a relationship to survive a rejected proposal. Phoebe's like, but it wasn't rejected. It was just postponed. And Piper nods, and Phoebe's like, Piper, I'm just not ready. You know that. She says, I do, but it's not my heart that's involved, or my ego for that matter. You should talk to him again. And she gets up and says that she's going to P3 to set up for this corporate party and heads out, and Phoebe chases after her.
So, I mean, in terms of the scene, I think it's really cute. I like the setup. Obviously, we're setting up this party, which is going to come into play a little later on. We get the idea, some nice sisterly conversation here about what's going on with the whole Phoebe and Cole relationship. And I do agree. I think that part of it is this hyper fixation that Cole's having on his worry about, like we were talking about earlier, Phoebe being in danger without him specifically being there to protect her. And then also as a distraction from the fact that, of course, she did reject his marriage proposal. And while I understand where Phoebe is coming from, and like we know her really well, so we kind of like get that she does have this hesitation when it comes to love and relationships. I 100% agree with what Piper's saying. Like, a relationship is not going to survive this.
Yeah. It's definitely a very painful thing for Cole to have to deal with right now, especially now that he is human, Like, he's definitely got to have that thought in his mind, like, well, why is she still not wanting to marry me? Like, is it me? Again, like you said, we know Phoebe, we understand her side of things and where she's coming from, but I have to agree with Piper. Like, his feelings are at play here too.
Mhm.
And maybe this all is a big part of a distraction for what he's really feeling about the whole marriage front?
And they're also like, if she's not ready to get married right now, right? Why can't they have a longer engagement if it's something she wants in the future anyway? Like, I don't get why you have to say no to the proposal just because you don't want to get married this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we kind of see a little bit further why it's a little bit harder for her. And, we kind of figure out it's got a little less to do with the marriage itself and more to do with so many changes at once, I feel like. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
which I think is why by the end of the episode, I will come more to understand her point of view. But at this point, I'm
Mhm.
kind of like, well, why not just say you want to be engaged for a while before you actually plan the wedding? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with that. If it's got anything to do with like her not being ready to actually be married or because she's so concerned with demons right now, whatever it may be, that's understandable, but you can just have a longer engagement.
Yeah.
That'll be fine.
So then we go to the dining room parlor area, and Phoebe's saying, what if there's an attack? And Piper says, at 9 a.m., don't demons sleep? She's like, Piper, Cole thinks that demons are going to start banding together to take out the source. She's like, great. I say the only good source is a dead source. And Paige starts coming down the stairs with like tons of art supplies, and she puts them on the table as Phoebe is talking about faction leaders trying to kill them. And Paige is like, "Who's going to kill us?" And Piper's like, "No one." And Paige is like, "That's new." And she runs back up the stairs. And Phoebe says, "So I was thinking, since you're the potions master, isn't there something you could whip up? Some type of protection potion, maybe?" And she's like, "Phoebes, if there was such a thing as a protection potion, we'd be mixing it in our morning coffee." And she says, "I know, but there's got to be something that we can do. And by we, I mean you," which biggest sister thing ever. And she's like, "Well, I say we just wait until we're attacked like we usually do and deal with it then." And Paige walks back down with a box filled with more supplies and says, "Who's attacking us?" And Piper says, "No one." She says, "Right on, I get the weekend off." And Piper's like, "See, now that is the spirit." And Paige runs back up the stairs. And Phoebe says, "Piper, if Cole is right, we have no idea how many of them we're going to be up against." She's like, "Suddenly I'm beginning to miss the source." And she says, "And even if you don't think that we need protection, just think about Cole. He's a human being with no magical powers living in a house that's constantly under demonic attack." And Piper says that she'll make something after she goes to the club and deals with the client, and is saying how she wants a last minute theme for the party. And apparently, Piper hates themes, which is shocking since in season one, she loved that superstition themed party at Quake. But
Exactly.
whatever. So Phoebe starts saying that she loves themes and that she was the one who came up with her prom theme, which haven't we established that Phoebe was kind of like rebellious in high school? So kind of shocking that she went to prom, but whatever.
Yeah.
Piper isn't sure like why Phoebe is mentioning any of this, and Paige walks down with another box, and Phoebe's like, "Are you moving out?" And she's like, "No, just cleaning out." And Piper's like, "Your art supplies?" And Paige says, "Well, between witch work and work, I just don't have any time anymore." And Phoebe says, "This is perfect. We need a theme. You're an artistic creative type. I'll explain on the way. Us theme, you potion." And she starts pushing Paige towards the door. And Piper's like, "Me peeved, you annoying." And her and Paige head out.
I love everything about this scene. Like, it's so sisterly and maybe not 100% how a conversation would go, but it's definitely giving off very sisterly vibes and exactly how people talk to each other. I swear to God.
No, I think this scene is like perfectly paced. The comedic timing is right on point. Like everything here really, really works for me. I like the way that, even though Phoebe was kind of rejecting it when Cole was bringing it up as an idea, she really was serious when she said first thing in the morning she'd think about it, right? Because now she's kind of bringing it up to Piper, talking about the fear of the factions. I like Paige coming in and out of the scene. I think it's really funny and it really kind of like allows for those moments of ease in an otherwise stressful conversation that the other two sisters are having.
Absolutely. And again, it's something that I can understand both sides, where Piper's like, well, we've never like been so preemptive before. Why don't we just wait till someone attacks? And Phoebe's trying to stress the importance of the situation and how many could be after them and this and that, you know? It's so funny that we constantly see Piper going back and forth between like our, at least in the beginning of the season, we did see her more on a like demon strike, you know? And then now she's more of like, okay, normal life, normal life. So maybe that's a little more of her positive coping skills with Prue's death.
Yeah, I think it is kind of her because I think when we saw her really on that demon train was really when she was at the height of her grief and not dealing with her
Yeah,
loss of Prue. Whereas not that she's moved on, but like she has moved to a point in her grief where she is more able to move through life like she had before. So I think that's her one accepting her role as the charmed one, but not actively seeking out danger or seeking out demonic fights just to kind of get her anger out on something. It's her just living her life as she normally would.
absolutely. And it's so funny because we always had Prue as kind of the one that's like, oh, we gotta take care of this now. Demons, demons, you know, like protection. Now that there's not a sister who's so like intensely focused on that, we kind of notice that they all take turns in like a little rotation of who's more focused that week or that time period. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I kind of do enjoy seeing that. And this time we got Phoebe kind of calling out, hey, as much as it was annoying, Cole's right, we should be worried about this. We should be doing something about it, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I also do like the idea of kind of Phoebe giving Piper this task and being like, well, like me and Paige will handle the client at P3, which I think kind of brings us back to that point that, like, yes, it's Piper's club, but at the same time, all of them could very easily like manage that together. And sometimes that does become more of a plot might, but other times it's very much like Piper just like P3 is my club, even though as we remember, like all three sisters did invest into it because they did take it out of money from the house, which they all own together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, it is technically like they did that for Piper, for her to
Mhm.
run and have it be, her dream, whatever. So yeah, it's more Piper's focus, but I like that we do have moments where we see the other sisters getting involved in that,
Yeah.
which they should, because like you said, it's an investment that they all put into. Aside from that, I'd say the whole Paige thing, her throwing out her painting supplies and everything, I can totally understand. It's very valid because we never, like, we saw in the beginning that she was interested in those things, but we never really see her painting or doing any of those things. And her reasoning for it is very understandable. And it's definitely going to become a little more important later on in the episode, which I'm excited for.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll just say, like, as someone who's like, I mean, I consider myself like a creative person, and like it's really a sad plot line to me because I feel like it is something that happens so often. Like when life gets crazy, like your art is kind of the first thing you're willing to kind of put to the side or throw away or whatever. I know even me, like I recently got back into like really focusing on like my writing and things like that because I had had a point where like when I first got sick and I was having relationship issues and I was like working a full job for the first time since I finished school, I was like not writing, right? And then
Yeah.
I finally like started making time for it again. And I'll just say that like everything about my life feels better since I did that because like finding whatever it is that makes you happy in life is important, and whether that's like a form of art or just some other interest that you have, like if you like hiking or something, doing things like that for yourself are really, really important. So it's really sad to see Paige kind of putting that on the back burner.
Exactly. Like when you have things you're genuinely passionate about, genuine hobbies that do make you happy, and you kind of have to let them go because life gets in the way. It happens far too often, and a lot of people lose themselves in the process. And like you said, that's something that can be the stability. That can be like the grounding factor for you, something that whether it goes somewhere or it doesn't, that's something that keeps you centered, something that makes you happy and that makes you unique and special in your own way. And it sucks to see that Paige kind of is losing that about herself because of the witch stuff and the work stuff, you know what I mean? But it is totally relatable and totally understandable as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, as we're going to see later in the episode, like Paige is an incredible artist. Like she really should be doing this more. Like I love it.
I do, and I can only hope that throughout the rest of the show we get to see more of that in her.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, about this whole protection potion thing, I know that's not technically something they can do, but remember that witch that cast a protection spell on herself?
Yes, but wasn't she also like not good at it? Like, wasn't she also just like a practitioner, not like a real
Yeah,
witch?
she was, but I guess we never really got a clear answer as to whether like the protection spell actually did work because she cast it and they saved her just in time, or if she just got lucky. But I mean, I guess we can assume she just got lucky based on the craziness that was surrounding her, but
Maybe. I mean, then again, we are always talking about destiny in the show. So maybe it was her kind of protection spell that put her on the radar of the powers that be kind of sending the sisters to save her just in time.
exactly. Like I definitely do wonder about that. So I don't know. Curious to see. what Piper's going to concoct.
True. I also wonder if it's going to be like similar to that old black magic when they give like the fake spell to Kyle to like give him confidence because there is no confidence potion. If she's just going to
Yeah,
tell Phoebe she made a protection potion.
that would be kind of cool because it really would. It would boost it's that placebo effect, you know?
Yeah.
Could work, man. Then we move into this random alleyway and we see a homeless man walking. And then the warlock from before and a friend of his blink in. And the homeless man shifts into his demonic form and says, "Back off, we're on the same side." And the warlock says, "Oh, we almost killed a demon. The source would have our heads." And the second guy says, "Man, I love that glamoring power. You know, I fall for it every time." And the demon says, "If you warlock scum don't mind, I've got work to do." And he starts to walk off, but then the first guy says, "Oh, but so do we, and we're going to need to borrow that little trick of yours." So the second guy stabs the demon and he turns into flames and vanquishes. Then the first demon tells the second guy to kill the charmed ones with his new power and bring him theirs. And the other guy's like, "I thought we were taking out the witches together." And the first guy says, "I have a faction to build, and time is of the essence. There's recruiting to do, powers to gather." The second guy says, "So I'm supposed to risk my life so you can become the source?" First one says, "Aren't you tired of living under demonic rule, of being a second-class citizen?" And then he starts repeating parts of the politician's speech that he kind of stole from earlier. And the second guy says, "And what do I get out of it?" First guy says, "A little bit of inspiration," and he holds up the ring of inspiration and it glows red all over the second guy and he grins and blinks out. So about this side, I didn't know that there was like a little bit of a, animosity between demons and warlocks, but it kind of seems that way here.
I think we've gotten little hints at it previously of like, just demons we've seen kind of talking down about warlocks. But I think this is our first like direct confirmation that like obviously demons fall much higher in the hierarchy. And we know the source is a demon, so it does make sense. And that like warlocks are kind of not as respected.
Absolutely. We definitely have seen more of that. I do also want to say this warlock, which we don't know his name, but the one with the ring of inspiration, he is quite the one who can convince people. Like everybody
Yes.
seems to fall for his tricks, and we see that time and time throughout the episode.
But do we think that's just because he's wearing the ring of inspiration?
That's what I was thinking. Like he must be giving that to himself, especially they kind of throw that as a little hint to
Yeah.
kind of let us know because he repeated the politician's speech. You know what I mean? So I can only imagine that that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it has to also be like somewhere embedded in his personality too, because I think that, like, we're going to find out later, like, the ring doesn't create something, right? It just inspires you to do what you could already do. So there is
Mhm.
something within him, I think, that exists like this, but the ring just kind of makes him more charming and more like inspired to give these quote unquote great speeches and like get people to
Absolutely.
follow after him. I also think that here we're obviously getting the idea of this rule that demons and warlocks aren't supposed to kill each other, which is interesting because we've definitely seen demons and warlocks kill each other before, though most of the time it is in some kind of direct conflict or as like a severe punishment for something.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like the bosses kill the lower,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Mhm.
But yeah, no, I think there's definitely something here that we haven't seen before. We didn't know that there was some sort of demons and warlocks don't kill each other, or you don't kill other people on the same side. The source would have your head. That's not something we've really seen before.
Yeah. So then we're at P3, and Phoebe and Paige are sitting with Bev, and they're recommending 40s night as a theme. And they say that, like, one of the reasons to do it is for, like, patriotism, which again goes back to what we were talking about a few weeks ago, with that being, like, very 2001, post 9/11, promoting, like, patriotism. Bev starts talking about how she prefers the 50s, and Paige kind of likes and makes a comment about that being overdone. And then Phoebe compares her to Veronica Lake, who I didn't know who that was. So I Googled her and she was like a 40s femme fatale in like different noir movies. And suddenly, like, Bev is into it because Veronica Lake is gorgeous. So if someone compared me to her, I'd be down for this party theme as well. Um, Phoebe gives her like a business card for a costume place, and Bev leaves just as Cole walks in. And Phoebe's like, "Oh, if it isn't Mr. Sneak Out of Bed." And he says that he had stuff to do, and they hug, and she feels something and is kind of like, "What is that?" And he pulls a gun out of his waistband. And Phoebe and Paige are both so fucking upset. Like, I've never seen them more upset the entire show.
Genuinely.
And Cole's like, "Come on, you guys see worse than this every day." And Phoebe says, "No, we see demons every day. There is a huge difference." And he's confused. And Paige says that there's no chance they'll accidentally vanquish themselves. This is much worse. And Phoebe asks where he got the gun. And he says, "Well, I may not be a demon anymore, but I still know where to find the bad guys." And Paige says, "Well, why don't you go find the bad guys and give it back to them?" He's like, "I have to have a way to protect myself and the woman I love." And Phoebe says, "Okay, Cole, I am not living in the house with a gun. It makes things more dangerous, not less." And he's just clearly shocked by this. Leo orbs in and Phoebe tells him that Piper's at home. And he says, "I know, I just talked to her. I came here to find you guys." And Cole asks if there was an attack. And he says, "In a way, muses have been disappearing and the elders are very concerned." And Phoebe's surprised that they're real. And Leo starts saying that they're in danger and that it would be a powerful evil to find a way to hurt a muse. And Cole's like, "Factions." And that's when the second warlock from the previous scene blinks in, out of sight, kind of hidden. And Phoebe says that they should head back, and Leo says he'll meet them at home. And Phoebe gives him the gun to give to Daryl before he goes to check with the elders. And they all start to walk out, and Leo says to Cole, "I won't even ask," and shakes his head and orbs out. Then the warlock glamours into Leo.
So, quite the scene here. I like the whole little 40s night theme that that idea. It's not super important, the theme to the plot, but I do like that we're going to get to see that a little later on.
Yes.
So, definitely enjoying that. The whole Cole of it all, I mean, I genuinely would not have expected them to be this shocked about him having a gun, you know what I mean?
Especially after seeing like in the Western episode, like Prue was super into like the guns, Cole was super into the guns. Like none of that shocked me. I didn't really do research about what was going on at this specific time in terms of like gun control, gun violence. I do know that Alyssa Milano is very for gun control, so it does make sense to kind of have this as a plot line. And obviously, there were mass shootings going on in the United States during this time because that did start becoming more of a thing around the late 90s, early 2000s. So it does make sense that they would have an anti gun storyline. But in a show where we do see lots of violence all the time, it is a little bit of a surprising plot point, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I can understand it for what you said, the time period. However, it does feel a little bit out of place to me.
But it also feels like, why does Cole think that a gun would be helpful? Because most demons and stuff like that aren't affected by guns anyway. So it does feel kind of like unnecessary and just like they want to make a point about gun control, not like it's actually important to the storyline.
Yeah, which it definitely wasn't. But, we can also chop it up to more of Cole's storyline of doing everything he can to try to protect them and like making decisions because he doesn't have his powers anymore.
Yeah, definitely. Because I do think other times when we've seen guns in the story, like the only people who've ever been hurt by guns are the sisters. Like everyone
Yeah,
else who's ever been shot was a demon and it just didn't affect them at all.
genuinely. So it doesn't quite make sense.
And then, I mean, in terms of Leo coming in, that's really just pushing the plot forward. Cole being like factions was really funny. And then obviously we see that the warlock is going to pose as Leo.
Exactly. And now we have the reason for the sisters to know about the muses disappearing.
Exactly, yes.
So now back at the manor in the attic, Piper is in the book and Phoebe asks her about the potion, but Piper says that she didn't get to it yet. And she's on the page with the muses, and Paige is looking over her shoulder. And she says, Muses are beings of pure light whose sole purpose is to inspire people's passion and creativity. Like angels, they guide us with an unseen hand of inspiration. And Phoebe asks how evil can hurt someone invisible, and Piper says that she's not sure and can't figure out how to summon one to ask them. So then we see a muse appear behind them, translucent, so none of them can see her. And Phoebe feels something and thinks that there's a muse in the room. And then the muse puts her hand up to Phoebe, and Phoebe says a spell that makes her visible, and she appears behind them. So then Melody introduces herself, the muse, and says that she knows them and that she's been inspiring them their whole lives. She was hoping now that they could help her. She says her friend was captured at a symphony, and she was lucky to get away from the warlock with the Ring of Inspiration, which we find out was created to allow the wearer to see and capture muses, and that it was created by good magic to channel inspiration in times of great need. Paige asks if a warlock is like a demon because she's never had experience with them before, and Piper says pretty much, yeah. And that's when Leo walks in, and Phoebe says, I thought you were orbing. And he's like, what? Then Paige says, Melody, Leo, White Lighter, Muse. And Leo says, nice to meet you, at the same time as Melody says, we go way back. And they all kind of look at him confused because obviously this is not Leo. And Leo's like, right, good to see you again. And Phoebe asks if he's heard of the ring, and he says that he thinks so. And Piper's like very suspicious and says, isn't that something you would have normally mentioned earlier? And Leo's like, right, yeah. And then behind his back, he kind of summons an athame and it appears in his hand. And he's like, sorry about that. And Piper's like, Leo, and calls his name. And he's like, what? And then all of a sudden, the real Leo orbs in behind her. And while they're all shocked in the moment, the warlock stabs Phoebe in the back as she turns towards Leo. And then he blinks out, and Cole walks in, and Piper and Leo run over to him, and he appears behind Paige, so Cole warns her. Paige orbs out, and then the warlock shifts back into himself, and Piper blows him up. Then Leo heals Phoebe, and Paige orbs back in and asks what that was. And Cole says that it was a warlock, and Piper asks Melody if he's the one that captured her friend, but she says no. Then Phoebe says they must be working together, and Cole says, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is what you call a faction. And he looks at Phoebe with his eyebrows raised, like, very much like I told you so.
So this scene, obviously, we're getting the sense of what muses are and then the arrival of our muse, Melody, for the episode. I really like the way that Piper and Leo's connection allows her to know like right away that it's not him, even though like the other sisters like start to pick up on it, but Piper seems to know right from the beginning. I also really enjoy the comedy of this scene, which is really good. It's also interesting to me the way that Paige has never faced a warlock before, but when we think back to season one, most of their early issues were with warlocks. Demons didn't come into play till earlier. So that kind of like reversal is really interesting here too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything. I mean, again, back to Piper and Leo's connection, I really do love that they play into that here. Especially, it brings me back to that episode where Piper was taken over by the alchemist, the one that the alchemist created, the demon. And Leo knew from her kiss and everything and was like, Piper, what's my name? And, they're able to see that within each other, which I absolutely love. It's the love I aspire to have.
No, genuinely, genuinely. Like they know right away. I really love that. We also, of course, get the warlock's little tricks that don't really work on the sisters because, as usual, they're better prepared to kind of deal with this. Poor Phoebe got stabbed. Luckily, Leo was able to heal her. And then, Cole being all, I told you so about the factions.
Yeah, exactly. Which we're definitely going to see a little more of Cole's ego come into play here.
Yeah, definitely, which I think is just one of those reminders of like his evil past, right? Is that all demons kind of have that aspect.
Absolutely. It's definitely a hard thing for him to let go of. At least he's using it in a more useful way.
Yeah.
Like, at least it's not in such a negative way. He's genuinely trying to help, but he still has those hints of who he used to be being thrown at us.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess the only other thing there, of course, we learned the history of the Ring of Inspiration and how, of course, it's supposed to be used by good magic, but in this case, a warlock is using it for evil.
Right. And I don't think we ever really find out how he got the Ring of Inspiration, do we?
I don't think we do, honestly.
Well, plot's sake, something that happened behind our backs, I guess.
Yeah, because it's not like we find out who he stole it from. Interesting.
Exactly. Yeah, I just realized that. But
Like, where were they keeping it that it was so easy for this warlock to access?
definitely wondering the same thing. But it makes sense that, the warlock, his plan didn't last, it didn't work through, and I think we're going to see the other warlock plan around that and or maybe have known that that was going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. So then we're in the stairway and everyone's following Piper down, and Phoebe's asking where she's going and saying that they need a plan. Piper says she has one and that she can taste how to make a potion. Paige approaches her boxes and starts talking about how she can't believe she almost threw away her art supplies. And Phoebe says that she needs to write a vanquishing spell and that she hears rhymes in her head. Melody realizes that her staying there too long is making the inspiration intense. And Piper says, okay, but that's good. If the warlocks are enslaving other muses to inspire them, then we need all the help we can get. And Paige has an idea of how to get the ring and asks Melody to describe the warlock so that she can draw him. And Cole thinks that Leo should orb him underground and says that he can find out who the faction leader is. He says, I may not have my powers anymore, but I still know the terrain. And Phoebe says, yeah, and you may just find yourself in everlasting pain. And Piper tells Cole that he'll be a sitting duck without his powers. And he says he already is, and at least this way he can be useful. And he puts his hand on her shoulder and she knocks it off. And Phoebe's like, Cole, you are useful, alive. Just now you have to be the brains behind the operation, not the brawn. And he says, well, is there some rule that says I have to choose? And she says, I can make one up, but it would just be a ruse. And Melody is starting to talk, but everyone ignores her. And Paige says, I think Cole has a point. And Phoebe's like, excuse me? And she's like, well, he is a demon, right? And she's like, was a demon. And Melody tries to talk again. And Paige is like, no, he was a half demon that's probably lived for about a century. So that means he knows his way around down there pretty well. And we can use all the help we can get. And Melody's like, Leo. And he starts trying to step in for Melody, but Phoebe cuts him off and says, no, the point is bounty hunters haven't been attacking because they think he's dead. If he goes down to the underworld and Cole yells, I'm still here. And Piper says, Cole, if you go underground and anyone sees you, you will be back on the demonic radar. Only this time, you will not have anything to protect yourself. Phoebe says, it's starting to seem like you have some type of death wish. And he says, it seems to me that you won't be happy until I don an apron and become your houseboy. And Leo says, hey, all right, here's the thing, guys. Every time there's a muse around, passions tend to run a little higher. And Melody says, a lot higher. And Leo says, so let's keep that in mind in our communication with each other, okay? And Phoebe nods, and Piper tells Phoebe to write the spell, Paige to draw, and asks Cole to help her with the potion by telling her everything he knows about warlocks. So they all split up, and then Leo and Melody share a look and then follow after.
This is like one of my favorite scenes of the whole episode. I absolutely love it. I've already shared countless times about how much I love when all of them kind of go in with each other and argue, and there's this chaos, and they're all coming up with plans, and it's all of them at once. It's like the best scenes to me. I love it. And we see that they're all becoming so passionate. Clearly, Leo's unaffected by this, I assume, because he's a white light or dead. But everyone else just being so intense about like, oh, we got to do this, we got to do this. Phoebe with her spell, Piper with the potion, and Paige with her idea of drawing the demon. You know what I mean? And Cole with his desire to go to the underworld and find out who the leader is. Everything about it is just perfection to me. I mean, it's mostly chaos and arguments and subtle things that we're seeing within them and subtle issues that they're having. But at the same time, we get to see a clear plan coming through that actually is pretty logical, I think.
Yeah, I think they all have really good ideas and they're having a hard time hearing each other because they are so focused on their own plans, which I think is effective. I like the way that they're taking this moment to split up, and I'll have more to say about the reasons behind that in the next scene. I do think that everyone does have solid points, particularly when it comes to Cole putting himself in danger. But I do understand, again, where he's coming from and why he wants to do this.
Agreed. I mean, he feels like there's not much he can do to help, but he knows that's one thing he is capable of, is knowing the terrain and being able to spy and figure those things out for them.
Yeah. I also do like kind of the callback to the previous episode here with Paige being like, well, he is a demon and like not really moving past learning the truth of Balthazar last episode.
Exactly. After this, we move into the kitchen, and Piper is making the potion, and she's like, "What I don't understand is why a warlock would even want that ring." And Cole says, "Are you kidding? Evil never gets to feel the muse's inspiration. I can tell you, I've never felt anything like it in my life." And Leo asks him what it feels like, and Cole starts describing it as a power surge and adrenaline, and tells Piper to hurry up because the warlocks will want more of it. Then Piper tells him that he needs to be patient with this and about the marriage front thing with Phoebe. Because she said that so out of nowhere. Cole's like, I don't think that's really any of your business. And Leo's like, you don't know sisters very well, do you? And Piper says, Cole, you're struggling, right? Trying to figure out how to be this new person. And Cole says to Leo, I thought we were here to talk about warlocks. And Leo's like, no. And then Piper's like, what you don't get is that Phoebe is trying to do the exact same thing. She's always been the youngest sister, the eternal child, the carefree, fun-loving, and Cole's like, and? And Leo's like, well, in a minute, she lost Prue, discovered Paige, and became the middle sister. Piper says, and to top it all off, you propose. The idea of marriage, being that much of a grown-up, is terrifying to Phoebe. And he says, did she say that? And Piper's like, no, but she doesn't have to. I'm her big sister. I've known her only, her whole life. Then Cole asks to have a word with Leo privately, and they head out as Piper goes back to the potion.
So I love this scene. I really like the way that Piper kind of explains what Phoebe's feeling to all of us in a way that I think Phoebe never would have been able to express so directly herself, which again is that aspect of them having that long-standing close relationship as sisters. And I also like the way that Leo has had to deal with his own feelings about how close the sisters are in the past. And now he's kind of like to Cole, like, get used to it.
Yeah, pretty much. I love everything about this because it really does bring back everything. It brings back that connection between the sisters, what they have. Again, I love that, Leo and Piper feeding off of each other and kind of finishing each other's sentences. That's just adorable. And Piper saying what kind of everyone's been thinking, like this is a huge change that she's finally acknowledging this huge change that Phoebe has had to go through, that all of them have had to go through. And we've always known Phoebe as exactly the way Piper's describing her. And it really genuinely is a big adjustment for her, just as much as it is for everybody else.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. And
and I
part of
just
me feels,
absolutely,
sorry.
I was just gonna say how much I admire the way like Piper has her back on this and like explains it for her. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think sometimes you do need someone a little bit outside of the situation to really explain effectively what's going on because, like, her
Hmm.
feelings are involved in that she cares about her sister. And I think she does care about Cole a little bit too,
Yeah,
but it's not her directly being affected by this choice, right? So she's able to kind of say, look, I know this is where you're coming from because she was even saying to Phoebe earlier, this is definitely how Cole feels about this situation. And now she's talking to Cole and she's saying, listen, this is how Phoebe feels, and helping them to really see each other's point of view, which is really that return to Piper as the middle sister that we've been seeing throughout the series.
absolutely. Always playing that middle role. At the end of the day, it's still who she is.
Exactly. And then we see, of course, Phoebe is now learning that role, like Piper talks about. And this is difficult for Phoebe because with her loss, she's had all these new things come into her life. And it goes back to earlier in the season when she was saying in the first year after a loss, you don't make big decisions. You don't sell the house. You don't get married. All those things she was talking about before. So it makes total sense, as well as with her feelings. In her logic, Phoebe doesn't think this is the right choice for her right at this moment.
Absolutely. It's totally understandable, and I totally agree. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And obviously, we also learn here how effective the muse's inspiration is physically, right? That it's giving him this boost of adrenaline, this desire to do more, which I think will come up more in the next scene.
Exactly. So then we move into the dining room, and Cole says to Leo, I'm asking for a favor, Leo, man to man. And Leo's like, you want me to talk to Phoebe? And he's like, no, I want you to orb me underground. And Leo says, Cole, that's the inspiration talking. He says, maybe so, but I want you to think about it, Leo. Their big plan right now is to draw the warlock. And he kind of laughs about it. And Leo says, they're the charmed ones. I trust that they know what they're doing. And Cole says, just listen. I can't be certain, but I think that the warlock used demonic powers. And Leo says, which means he killed a demon to get them. Aren't there laws against that? And Cole says it's punishable by death. Now I know where the demons will convene to discuss his treason. They probably know by now which warlock is behind it. All we have to do is listen. Leo says, and not be seen. And Cole says, we can go now and be back before anyone notices. And he puts his arm around Leo. And Leo's like, oh, they're gonna notice, and then they're gonna kill me. And they're basically like hugging each other and orb out.
So I remember a few episodes we made a joke about them like holding hands to orb out. So I like that we got this like awkward hug to orb out in this episode. I thought it was really funny.
It's so funny because it's like when you see guys who are like, man, I love you, man. And they're like, instead of giving each other an actual normal hug, they just gotta like do a
It's like a
quick
weird
pat on the
side
back.
hug
Yeah.
with like the arm like
With like the pat on the back and shit. Like, because they're like, oh, I'm still a man. I can't.
I'm like, I'm not gay, bro. I can't
Yeah.
hug you.
And again, another moment of Leo and Cole working together. I love the shit out of it every single time.
No, I'm really enjoying their dynamic in this episode. And like this scene is one of those moments where we're seeing like a bromance forming. I'm like, I like this. I like them interacting. I like them kind of going behind the sisters' backs a little bit. I think it's really interesting the way he's like, all right, like Leo, like be my boy, help me out. Like it's very like you shady little bitch, but I like it. I'm enjoying it as a dynamic.
I really definitely am. You kind of see that growth and that connection with each other, you know? It's definitely entertaining to watch. And it's kind of nice to see Leo not be the only one, the only man. You know what I mean? Like they get to communicate with each other and kind of form their own little plot. Like Leo's not the only one who's like the fourth wheel with the sisters anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. He can bond with someone else because no one's ever going to be as close to anyone as the sisters are to each other in this universe. And so, kind of bringing in that, like, they both have that same, like, I'm with a sister. So, like, I get this more than like anyone else would. And I really like the way that Leo still defends them here. The way he's like, they're the charmed ones, like, they know what they're doing, but like Cole still kind of being able to convince him that they can do this sneakily and like they're not putting themselves in danger even though they obviously are.
Right. We're just gonna listen. No, but I do love everything about that scene. And Leo just kind of accepting that they're gonna find out and they're gonna be pissed, but you know, gotta do what you gotta do for your boys.
Exactly. Saturdays are for the boys here.
Exactly. Oh, I love it.
Oh god. Somewhere up in the attic and Phoebe is reading off her spell. She says, "A warlock is a funny thing. He blinks from place to place. And when we say these words to him, his face they will erase." And Melody and Paige are sitting together as Paige draws, and Paige is like, sounds more like a limerick than a spell. And Phoebe sits down and starts writing again. And Melody suggests an adjustment for the drawing and compliments Paige's work, saying that she has nothing to do with the product, only the inspiration to create it. And Phoebe's like, I could use a little of that over here. So Melody goes over and tells her to concentrate, and we hear this little like sound play. And Phoebe thanks her, and then she goes back over by Paige and says, so how come you stopped painting? And Paige says, how come you stopped inspiring me to paint? She said, I also have no control over the will, Paige. You stopped painting because you stopped caring about your art. And she says, no, I didn't stop caring about my art. I don't know. I guess I'm a perfectionist. And once I stopped having enough time to practice, well, I just kind of threw in the towel. Melody says, art isn't about perfection, it's about expression. The key is simply to love it. That's the call I answered. Then Piper walks in and says, I got potions. Who's got a spell? And Phoebe says, evil is a faithful foe, but good does battle best. We witches will, with these words, waste the warlock's evil zest. And Piper's like, wonderful, witty, but wordy. Phoebe hands a paper, annoyed, and then gets up and gives one to Paige and sees the drawing and is impressed. And it is a good drawing, it looks just like him. And Paige thinks now that she has something to focus on, she can call for the ring. And Phoebe says, that's perfect. The ring will orb to you, and then if he wants it back, he'll have to follow. And Piper says, which is when we hit him with the potion. Phoebe says, and make a huge commotion. And Piper says, right. The potion will flash in his eyes, which are very sensitive, and this should keep him from blinking long enough for us to vanquish him with the spell. So they explain blinking to Paige, and she asks why she doesn't just freeze him or blow him up, and Piper says, sometimes it doesn't work. The power of 3 is the only guarantee. And they're proud of themselves and clink their potion bottles. And Phoebe thinks that they should tell the guys their plan before they go for it. And Piper's like, why? And I'm thinking the same thing, but it's ob for plot's sake, babe. And Phoebe calls for Cole and is confused when there's no answer.
So again, another phenomenal scene. We're just full of them. This episode is so good. But yeah, we get to see, a little bit of comedy with Phoebe's spell, which definitely, even after even after Melody tries to help out, it's still a little bit limericky. But it works. It'll be just fine. And we get to see Paige's art art in full form. You know what I mean? We get to see how good she really is, which I can only hope we get to see more of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Like I loved seeing Paige's work. Also, it's so impressive in like when people can describe someone enough that someone can draw them because like I feel like I know very well what your face looks like, Mia, right? I could not describe you and have someone draw you accurately. Like that's just not like something I could do.
It would have to be like pen and pencil, and it would take hours. Like I'd literally be like, okay, I know what she looks like, but I don't know how to explain that to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I'd have to be like, no, her eyebrows like this, not like that. Like I can't like describe it.
Right, like I can't do that either. And then I'd start second guessing myself too. I'd be like, wait, is that? I'm like, damn, do I even know Jess's face for real? Like, there's no way. Like, whole sketch artists and everything like that. It definitely, I can't imagine that it's as easy as shows make it out to be.
No, definitely not. And then, I like Paige's little like quips here about like the reason she's not inspired and like her kind of feeling like things need to be perfect. Something I also really, really relate to, and why sometimes like there are forms of art I've wanted to try, like painting and stuff, where I'm like, no, I'm bad at this. I need to quit right away. But like obviously it's something that if I probably kept doing it, I could have gotten better at, but like I wasn't willing to take that time to practice. So
Exactly, as was I. I mean, I personally, art has never been my strong suit. Practice makes perfect. Some people are naturally gifted a little more than others. I mean, I'm not one of those people, but clearly Paige is. And it sucks because when you do have that, you're still a perfectionist. You want to make it perfect. And it sucks to me that she kind of gave up on that passion of hers, something that we're seeing right now for the first time how clearly good she is at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've been dropping those little hints about Paige's love for art throughout the show. So I like this kind of coming up in a really connected to the plot way in this episode. And I think her plan of, focusing on something to orb the ring is really interesting. And I'm excited to see like if it'll work or not.
Me too. And especially because that's not something that we've ever thought of as part of her power, to be able to orb something that wasn't already right in front of her. So we could argue whether it has more to do with the muse or whether or not that's just something she's always been capable of doing.
Yeah. And it definitely makes me wonder like, wow, like Paige's powers are growing quick. And that's something I think we've commented on before. And it's something that shows us just how quickly like she really is taking to the craft and becoming such an amazing witch like her sisters.
I absolutely agree.
And then in terms of the rest of their plan, I mean, this all works for me. Again, like I said during reading the scene, why the fuck do they need to consult the guys? It's literally just so they can realize they're not there. And it's just the most plot sake thing that I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's not something they've ever done before.
Usually they outright ignore the guys. Like, come on.
Genuinely. There was no reason, no backstory, no history that even can remotely give an explanation for that. But plot's sake.
Exactly.
So then we cut to the underworld and we see Leo and Cole are hiding behind some rocks outside of the High Council meeting quarters. And some guy walks up and asks them if they're lost. And Cole's like, Rake. And Rake is like, Balthazar, sorry, man. I thought you were a warlock. And he starts to turn away and then turns back and says, Didn't I hear you were dead? And Cole says, Yeah, and unfortunately, I have to stay that way. Then he pulls out an athame and stabs him in the gut, and Rake flames out. And Leo says, He seemed like a friend. And Cole says, in my old life, he was. And Leo says, It feels different, doesn't it? Killing now that you're human? And Cole says, Just keep an eye out, would you? And then he leans back by the rock and watches the council.
So this scene, I like this kind of connection back to Cole's past. Him having to kill a friend is really interesting. Leo bringing up the idea that like killing now that you're human is hard, but like, does that mean it's hard for the sisters to kill demons? Like, I feel like this is raising a question that's kind of weird to me. Like, should he feel bad killing a demon? Like, I think the guilt would come more from the fact that they used to be friends than the killing itself.
Yeah, I agree. I think, if anything, Leo kind of brought up the wrong point about it. I mean, I can understand where he's coming from in the sense that he's aware that Cole has never experienced what it's like to kill as a human being. But he's also not killing another human being.
Yeah, exactly.
He's killing a demon. So it doesn't quite add up, but I mean, I guess I can kind of understand Leo's general concern with it. It was just definitely not the right time to kind of point that out to him, I guess.
Yeah.
Like if he had killed a witch or an actual human, like yeah, that's different. I don't know. It
Because I
definitely
don't
didn't
think this
add
is
up.
the last time we'll ever see Cole kill a demon, probably, if he's going to continue working with the sisters. So, like, are we supposed to think that it's going to have this awful emotional effect on him every time? Because if so, like, poor Cole, Jesus.
Yeah, genuinely. And poor sisters, if that's a normal thing to feel this
Literally.
horrible about it.
Like, we've been watching them killing demons left and right for years, and we're supposed to think, like, this has some bad effect on them because they're human?
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't quite understand that. Again, feels a little more plot sake that they're trying to overemphasize Cole in his human form.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So then we're in the attic, and Piper's calling for Leo, and Phoebe comes back in and says Cole's nowhere to be found. And Piper says, and Leo still isn't answering. And they realize this must mean that they went underground, and Paige says, I'd rather do battle with warlocks than with the two of you. And Phoebe tells her to call for the ring, and she asks if they should wait for Leo in case they get hurt. And Phoebe's like, just call for the ring. And Paige tries, and nothing happens. Melody tells her to breathe and focus. She does. Then we cut from the drawing to the ring on the warlock's finger, and another warlock he's with now has energy balls, and he's putting his hand over it as the ring orbs away. And in the attic, Paige is impressed it worked, and Phoebe tells her to let the muses out.
So I love that Paige's little plan worked. Again, that's something we never really knew that her powers were capable of. Especially this quick. I feel like it took the other sisters a lot longer to advance. However, we can also attest it to the muse being there.
Yeah, definitely. And
But
obviously, plot wise, the plan worked. They're freeing the muses from the ring, and that's kind of what we got there.
exactly. So then back down in the underworld, or wherever that other warlock was, the warlock with the energy balls notices that his ring went missing and asks him where it went. And the first warlock says, "The charmed ones. Let's go get it back." And the other warlock says, "No way. They just vanquished that last sucker you sent in." And he says, "He didn't have your newly acquired power. You want to live in the shadow of demons your whole life?" And the other guy says, "Forget it, Devlin. It's suicide." And Devlin says, "They're expecting me, but not the two of us. We can take them. We'll share their powers, and together we'll rule the underworld. We're going to have so much fun." And he smiles, and they both blink out.
So I wrote this in my notes and I just have to point it out. So I don't know if you know these two actors, but they're both like ABC Family actors. Like the one is Mark Molina from Secret Life of the American Teenager, and the other one is Lauren's dad from the show Make It or Break It. So the entire time I was watching this episode, I just kept being like, oh, Lauren's dad is Devlin.
I completely forgot about the show Make It or Break It, first of all, and you just unlocked a whole memory for me because that was my shit.
I
the
love that
longest
show. I've
time.
rewatched it like 5 times. I love it.
I totally forgot about it, and I think I'm gonna have to rewatch it after this because
It's on Hulu, so
great, because how did I forget about that? I'm definitely gonna put that on today. But anyways, I feel like there's so many times where I'm like, huh, this one looks familiar, but like, what do I know him from? You know what I mean?
No,
That's
yeah, and I hate when
crazy.
I can't place it, but like I always have to look it up if I can't place it because I have to know the answer. I can't live not knowing.
True. Luckily, I have you to figure that out for me.
But anyway, to the plot itself. Obviously, here we're setting up the fact that Mark Molina is not as dumb as the other warlock. He's not just gonna go right in there, but possibly because of the muse and possibly because he's really charming, Devlin does convince him to go fight the charmed ones.
Exactly. He knows what he's doing. He's got them speeches that he know it's like he's so good at knowing exactly what he has to say when in order to get people to do what he wants.
Definitely.
Master manipulator. Keep an eye out for people like that, ladies and gentlemen. They're a little too good at fooling you.
Exactly. So then we're in the attic, and the sisters and Melody are hiding behind things. Mark Molina blinks in, and they pop out and throw the potion and say the spell, and he vanquishes. Then Devlin blinks in and grabs the ring, blinks out, then comes back in and sucks Melody into the ring. And Phoebe says, Piper, blow him up. And Paige says, no, you might blow up Melody too. And he blinks out.
So the plan was solid, but Devlin was clearly a little smarter than that.
Yeah, because they obviously weren't expecting the two. And Devlin played Mark Molina because he was like, they're not going to expect two of us. But it wasn't in the way Mark Molina was thinking. It wasn't, that means we can fight together. It means I'll pop in after they kill you.
Exactly. Like he gets to be the surprise factor. And everything happened so fast, I don't think they even had a chance to realize what exactly was happening and how he kind of bested them. So, it sucks because their plan was pretty solid, but to be fair, Devlin does have all that inspiration on his side that he's already been using, and of course, the original charming factor that he must already have.
Exactly.
So then, still in the attic a little bit later on, the sisters are now sitting at the table looking depressed, and Leo and Cole orb in behind them. And Cole says, "Oh, I know you're mad, but before you say anything, we found out that the faction leader is a warlock named Devlin." And Phoebe says, "Oh, he looked more like a Joe to me." And Piper says, "Uh-huh." And Leo asks where Melody is, and they tell them what happened. And Leo says, "Okay, so what exactly are you doing now?" And Phoebe says, "Basking in the brilliance of our failure." And Piper and Paige agree. And then they say that Devlin captured all the muses again and is going to use Melody's inspiration to kill them. And Leo says, "Okay, I understand that you guys have been on an inspiration binge and that you're wiped out, but now is not the time to give up." And Cole says he's right. Devlin will be back soon and stronger than before. Paige says, "We have no inspiration to fight him." Leo says, "But you don't need it. Melody just inspired your own passion, creativity, and talent. What you have to do now is find another way to tap into it." And Piper says, "I say we head for the hills." Then Cole says, "Great idea. It rhymes with kills." And Phoebe's like, "You think that's funny? If you had done what I asked and stayed here, you might have been able to help." And he says, "How? The minute Devlin arrived, you would have sent me to my room." And she says, "Cole, I wasn't just being a nagging girlfriend. I actually had good reasons for asking you not to go." And he asks what they were exactly. And she says, "I don't know, trying to keep you alive." And he says, "Because I'm not capable of defending myself. If that's what you think, no wonder you don't want to marry me." And she says, "I can't believe that's what you think. Is that really what you think?" And he asks what he's supposed to think. And she says, "You're supposed to know that I love you and that." And he cuts her off and says, "And that what?" "I have a hard time believing that any woman who is truly in love would really turn down a marriage proposal." She says, "Well, that's how little you know about women, Cole. There's still so much that we don't know about each other. I mean, we don't know the new rules. We don't know what it means for you to be human. And I don't know," and he says, "that you truly love me." And she says, "No, Cole, that's the one thing I do know." He says, "Well, then what's the problem?" She says, "I don't know how to be a wife." And then they kiss super passionately. And she says, "But I can't live without you in my life." And Paige notices that she rhymed. And Leo says, "This is what I'm talking about. Phoebe's passion for Cole is a natural way to access inspiration." And then Phoebe and Cole stop kissing, and she comes over and says that they have a warlock to catch. And she says, "I know we're beaten and I know we're tired, but that doesn't mean that we can just lay down and play dead." Piper says, "I don't think we're going to have to play." Leo, Cole, and Phoebe want them to find their own inspiration, and Phoebe starts rhyming about the good fight. And Piper's like, "Dr. Seuss, is that you?" And Paige gets up and says, "What if we didn't have to wait for Devlin to come to us? What if we went to him?" Then Phoebe says that they need a new spell and more potion, but Piper doesn't remember what was in the potion she made, and Phoebe tells her to start cooking and let that inspire her. Then Cole asks if she really wants to die, and Phoebe tells her to do it. For Leo, for me, for Paige, I don't care how you do it, just do it, because I guarantee you that Devlin's not sitting on his butt waiting for inspiration to strike.
So I really love this scene and the message of it. I like this idea that there are things in our life and in ourselves that are going to naturally inspire us and bring out our creativity, our intelligence, our perseverance, all those things when we really get into it. So I like that message. I like what's happening here. I like everything about the Cole and Phoebe interaction. It feels really, really natural and organic to me. And I love seeing them kind of really in this heat of the emotional moment express what their fears are, express what their truth is, and really come to an understanding with each other.
I definitely agree. We see so much passion here without the Muse being around between Cole and Phoebe, and her kind of realizing that that is her inspiration, her love for him, and whether it be somebody or, again, a hobby that makes you happy, anything that kind of inspires you to do better than you're doing right now is a natural way of inspiration. I think that's something they're kind of slowly starting to realize, and I do like the message that they're showing here that we don't need some sort of higher power. We can reach those things for ourselves. And I totally respect that they put that in this show. And this scene they play it just perfectly.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, per usual this season, they're killing it with the comedy. I mean, Dr. Seuss, is that you? I literally burst out laughing when Piper said that. Like,
Me too. One of my favorites.
And like I just love like the way Holly is putting on Piper's attitude in this entire scene is so funny to me. Like it's so well delivered. I really can't commend her enough.
I absolutely agree. And it doesn't feel out of place that Piper's kind of the last one to agree to this, you know? It feels very much of a Piper thing to be like, well, screw this, you know, screw this whole magic shit, screw everything. I have no desire, no inspiration. And that's it. That's all there is to it, you know?
Yeah, and I like that like Phoebe tells her, just start cooking and see what happens because I think that is something that we've seen for Piper before. It's the way she often deals with things and I think it will bring that inspiration out of.
I absolutely agree.
So then we're in like the underworld or an alley or somewhere, I'm not really sure. It's nighttime. And Devlin is giving a speech to a group of warlocks and saying that together they can take out the witches. He sprays them all with red light from the ring and tells them to prepare and not to be late. And they all blink out. And then he has like his arms up, standing there. It's like his hero moment, even though he's a villain. And then he blinks out as well.
So, not too much to say here. It's just more about clearly we see that he's got his plan. He's bringing everybody with him and going to fight the fight, you know?
Exactly. We see he has a fully formed faction now.
So then we go back to the manor and we're in the parlor. Everybody's there, and Cole says, "This doesn't feel right." And then the girls are on the floor around a table with a pot and candles. And Paige says, "Well, if anyone has a better idea, we're open to it." And Leo says, "You could try calling for the ring again." And Phoebe's like, "Oh no, that wouldn't work. He's probably figured out a way to protect the ring by now." Then Cole wants a minute to think, but they don't think that they have one because the world is uninspired while evil is inspired. And Leo says it could throw off the whole balance, giving evil the upper hand. And Cole says, "I get that, but they've never been to the underworld without me there to protect them." And Piper says, "We have a potion, we have the vanquishing spell, and we have the power of 3 and the element of surprise." And he says, "But what you don't have is any idea where Melody is." Then Paige says, "She's in the ring." And he says, "Which is on the finger of a warlock who could be anywhere doing anything with any number of demonic powers. I'm telling you, it doesn't feel right." Then Phoebe stands up and says, "I know." Cole says, "Then don't go." And she's like, "Baby, every time you went off to the underworld, every time you shimmered out of here, and I had to wonder if I'd ever see you again, it didn't feel right. But you had to go, didn't you?" And then they look at each other, and she kisses his cheek and touches his face and goes back by her sisters. And Leo tells them to be careful. Then they say the spell and teleport away, and Cole and Leo just look at each other. Ugh, my heart.
I think this is a really nice scene. I really like the way that Phoebe is expressing that she's also had these fears for Cole, right? Which obviously come from the fact that he loves her, but also the fact that he needs to trust her and that she can do things on her own and can protect herself. So I like that aspect of it. I do think that he's making some good points about them going in when they're really not sure about what this faction is and what they're planning, though I do agree that the sisters have a good plan based on the knowledge they have.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Based on the tools they're given, the information they have, this seems like one of their best chances and one of their best options. And the fact that they all agree on it, we usually know that, first of all, there's no talking them out of it when it comes to that point. And also, they usually find a way to back each other up and figure it out and believe in the fact that destiny and their intuition is enough to get them through this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of bringing me back to earlier episodes where, Leo's disagreed with their plans, right? And they've been like, well, we're going to do it. And then we're seeing the same thing with Cole here.
Exactly. And I do, like you said, agree that Cole is definitely making some valid points. I think it's very much warranted. He's kind of seeing that there's something there that they're not quite getting, that he's even not quite understanding yet, but something that he genuinely believes in his heart and soul is going to go wrong or not going to go the way they expect. So, while we know they're more than capable of being able to kind of roll with the punches and figure it out as they go along, there's still that fear that something could not go right and screw them over in the end.
Yeah, and I do think that Cole's a planner. I mean, we saw the way he was planning everything out, even when he was like going up against the Charmed Ones before he joined their side. So
Mhm.
I think going into things blind, especially when he's not there to help and he can't be part of it, is very scary to him. So I think that's understandable as well.
Yeah, he's never been one that goes blindly and relying on faith and your own gut. You know, he's always been one that plans for things to fail and plans for things to go wrong and test the waters and things like that, where the sisters are like, have a little more faith in reality and destiny and that things are going to work out the way that they are supposed to.
Exactly, yeah. So then we're at P3, and Phoebe says, "Oh no, we didn't get sent back in time again. It's just 40s night. It's the party." And Piper's wondering why they're there, and Paige wonders if the spell didn't work. They think it did, but that Devlin and the faction are there. And by the bar, we see Devlin sip a martini, the ring on his finger.
So I like this. They're over here in 40s night at the party. I kind of like that little like, oh shit, did we go back in time? But, you know, we know that they didn't. And for them to realize like, okay, there's no way the spell didn't work. That means that the demons must be here.
Yeah.
Or the warlocks.
Exactly. Though I am wondering how they knew about 40s Night, because the demon who spied on the setup of 40s Night was killed by the Charmed Ones, or the Warlock, I mean. So when did he have time to tell Devlin about 40s Night?
Huh, that didn't even occur to me. God only knows. Again, something we, I guess, are gonna have to chop up to plot's sake.
Plot's sake, baby.
So, back at the manor in the conservatory, Leo's in the chair with his head down and his eyes closed while Cole is pacing. And Cole says, I don't know how you do it. How do you sit by and do nothing while your wife's life is in danger? And he says, Cole, I get that this is a hard time for you, but I need you to do me a favor and shut up. And Cole's like, excuse me? And Leo says that he needs to concentrate. Cole's like, on the floorboards? He's like, no, I'm listening for a call from the girls so I can be there in case they need me. And then Cole walks away and turns around and says, it's a trap. I knew this didn't feel right. Why didn't the warlocks attack again after they got the Muse? Leo says evil isn't exactly known for its patience. And Cole says it's because they already failed twice, so Devlin knew he needed numbers. Not too many warlocks are stupid or brave enough to attack right here in the manor, but plenty can be convinced to lay an ambush. And Leo says, hang on, that's strange. The girls aren't underground, they're at P3. And Cole says, they can't use their powers in public. And Leo's like, I promised. And Cole's like, you only promised not to orb me underground. And then he gives kind of an awkward smile, and basically he did his convincing again of Leo.
Yeah. Leo's pretty easily convinced by Cole, but we already know Cole's a master manipulator, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, of course. And of course they have this natural bromance that I love so much.
Yes, that budding bromance really is coming into play in this scene. But I also like the way that Leo's like not taking Cole's shit. He's like, shut up. Come on. I know what I'm doing. I'm doing something. I'm listening for the girls. Like, this is my job. I'm their guide. I protect them, but I also let them do their own thing. So I like Leo standing up for himself in that way.
I absolutely agree. And it is funny to think about because genuinely, like wholeheartedly, man or woman, but especially men naturally do have that instinct to protect women and naturally have that instinct to, you know, like, okay, let me throw myself to the fire to protect the women and children. You know what I mean? That's just something that's always been the way it has been.
But I also think that's only because society has conditioned them to be that way. Like, I don't think it's a natural instinct that comes from like nothing. Like, I think it is from the fact that like that's kind of been a position they've been put into. Like, I think in very, very early times, it was like, well, if like my child survives, then my line lives on. And like my wife is the one who can have children, right? So she's important. But in present day society, I think it's very much ingrained in the fact that like men are expected to do it, which has some healthy aspects to it and also has some unhealthy aspects to it when it comes to masculine culture.
Oh, it definitely does. And I'm not disagreeing with that in any way. I'm just saying it's undeniable that that feeling is there.
Mm-hmm.
That societal expectation is there. As much as we are working towards changing that, and I understand all of that, but it also is very much something that's not 100% healed yet.
Mm-hmm.
And even women, like, women feel that instinct to protect their family as well.
Yeah.
Leo has that desire, especially being that he's a man, to protect. So to see him kind of buckle down and say, okay, let me put my faith in these people, in these women, and trust that they know what they're doing, but let me stand on the side and make sure that I can be there if they need me. That's not something that we typically see in men. You know what I mean? And it's definitely something that I respect a lot that he does, because most men are incapable of that. And we can see here that Cole is doing quite the opposite of that.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a much more positive representation of kind of masculinity and the urge to protect people you love in Leo versus Cole. And I think it's something where Leo, one, has interacted with the sisters for a lot longer time and understands what the dynamic is between them. And also just the fact that he's more ingrained in the good side of things, which we've already pointed out multiple times, has, while it still does have elements of patriarchy, it has much less toxic patriarchal elements than we've seen on kind of the evil side of things.
100%. Here, he's able to put a little more faith in the woman, where that's something that Cole has never really experienced before. Like, he's portraying this very strong form of expectations of masculinity, where Leo's a lot more understanding of we're all equals. We all have our own capability of power. The root is to trust each other, believe in each other, be there for each other, and not overpower one another. And it's like it's nice to kind of see that contradiction coming to each other, still getting along, but kind of fighting against each other in that moment. I like that the show is trying very hard to portray that.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, in terms of like Cole's thinking, he is right here, right? He figures out what's going on and he is kind of stepping in where I don't know if he should be because it's not safe for him to be stepping into this role. And I think that is an element of toxic masculinity there too, right? Like putting himself in danger when really what he's doing is putting Phoebe more at risk because she's obviously going to jump in to protect Cole when maybe that's not the best thing for her to be doing in the moment, even though I know he is trying to help.
Exactly. It's very much they have two different ideas of their abilities to help the girls. And I think Leo has a little more faith in them as women and as the charmed ones than Cole does,
Yeah.
despite knowing everything that they've won against in the past.
Yes. And also, Cole, Mr. Technicality here, you only promised not to orb me underground. That is a sign of you being toxic, and I see you for what you're doing there.
I'm still in love with you, but I see what you're doing.
Exactly.
I see the red flags, and it makes me love you even more.
So then we're at P3, and the sisters are walking around trying to figure out how to find them. And Bev turns and scares her, and Piper jumps and blows something up. And Bev thinks it's fireworks and thinks they look great. Piper's like, "You're a genius," and walks off. And Phoebe's like, "How exactly is she a genius?" And Piper says, "The strobe lights. They'll work like the potion, but on a grand scale. It'll keep the warlocks from blinking. I'll freeze all the innocents. Anyone you see still moving, feel free to vanquish them." So they do it, and lots of people are like groaning once the strobe lights start, and Piper blows one up. Then one throws an energy ball at Paige, and she uses her power to throw it back. Then they see Melody being dragged away and calling for Phoebe. Paige starts running after her, and her sisters tell her to wait. And a warlock throws a power that hits Paige. And Phoebe starts going after Melody and kicks a demon, and Piper blows him up. Paige gets up, and Phoebe walks back over with Melody. Piper turns the normal lights back on and is like, "Okay, so who here doesn't want to die?" And they blink out, and the sisters and Melody walk out.
So I do love Piper's idea here. I really do. And I love the whole little fight scenes between all of the demons versus them, and how at the end of the day they know that they stand no chance against our girls.
Exactly.
I also do want to add that I love the confidence that Piper has gained in her power. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
before it went from like her being scared, because we've seen her try to do this whole freeze the innocence kind of thing before and struggle with it. Now she has that confidence where she knows she can do it, not a question, and also doesn't have that concern anymore of whether she's going to accidentally blow them up or freeze them. So Piper has come such a long way with her powers, even just since the beginning of this season, because she was still struggling with the whole new power of blowing things up.
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of it has come from what we were talking about earlier with her getting a better handle on kind of her emotions and her grief, which has allowed her to gain better control of her powers.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to get at. I mean, I think that we kind of see here Piper growing emotionally, which obviously we know ties to her powers, and we can kind of see the growth in both aspects, and her grieving better than she was in the very beginning. So I like that we get to see that here.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, Melody out of the ring? Interesting. Let's see where that goes.
Yeah, definitely a little confusing that they all of a sudden let Melody loose, and I don't know. Something's
Seems
not
like
adding up
another
here.
trap, maybe?
Definitely. Something you would think that they might kind of pick up on, but you can also understand in the chaos, they might be a little more confused.
Yes.
So now they go to the back alleyway, and Paige is holding her shoulder, which got hit, and says, "We still don't have the ring." Then Piper says, "That's okay. We have Melody. We'll get the ring next." And they realize that the people inside are still frozen, so Piper goes back in to take care of it. And then Phoebe says to Melody, "How are you? Are you okay?" And she walks up and says, "I am now," and then puts her hand on Phoebe's face and starts burning her. And then Cole pops out of nowhere and punches Melody in the face, and Phoebe throws the potion. Then Cole runs over and grabs the ring off Melody slash actually Devlin's finger, and he morphs back into himself and throws Cole across the alley. Then Piper comes running out, and Phoebe says, "Blow him up, blow him up." And she tries, but it doesn't work. And Devlin says, "I'm too strong for you, witch." And they do the spell, and he ends up vanquishing because he can't fight the power of three. And Phoebe goes and helps Cole up and hugs him, thanking him. And he gives the ring back to Paige, and she frees Melody. And Melody says, "Now that was inspired." And she gives her the ring, and Melody hugs all the sisters and says that she should leave. And Phoebe suggests that they go back to the party. All but Paige is willing to, because she's kind of inspired to spend the evening at home painting. And so the three sisters make up the spell to make sure Melody is invisible again, and she disappears. And then they walk off.
I have a couple questions about this scene. So, one, why did Piper have to go back inside to unfreeze things? It would have unfreezed on its own eventually. So, plot sake there.
Always
Also,
does.
why did they not notice that Melody was wearing the ring when they're talking about the ring? Another plot sake there. And then also, all of a sudden, they weren't worried about accidentally blowing up Melody too when Piper tries to blow up Devlin while he's wearing the ring.
Yeah, you're right, because they knew Melody was still inside. Yeah, definitely lots of things that don't quite add up in this fight scene slash kind of conclusion scene. I still definitely love it. I mean, I get that the point they're trying to make more of is more to do with Phoebe and Cole and them kind of having that faith and that inspiration without actually needing a muse and all of
Mhm.
that. However, it doesn't quite add up at all.
Yeah, like I like that they vanquished with the power of three. That works for me. I like that, Paige wants to go home. I like that they came up with a spell to turn Melody back together. Like all of that I liked, but like there were so many things that happened just conveniently for plot's sake in this scene that I was kind of like, why?
Yeah, there was a lot that has no need. Again, very much plot's sake. Not something I really appreciate because I think they could have done a better job, especially because throughout the majority of the episode, they've done such a great job at making it more understandable, realistic, you know what I mean? But we know this show. They gotta throw in an insane amount of plot sake somewhere. So
Exactly. It's always got to happen somehow.
so I guess this was our moment, and in such a well-rounded episode, there had to be a little hole in it, you know?
Yeah. Also, I just want to point out they couldn't have had like Devlin shift back into himself before Cole punched him in the face. We had to see Cole punch a woman in the face on screen. That was necessary.
I don't know, it worked for me. Fuck that bitch. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, I know.
Like, it was just like, why? Like, there was literally no reason other than they wanted to do it. Like,
Yeah, because I feel like more often than not, they usually do the like whole reveal of who they really are and like shapeshift
usually
back
he would
into
have
normal.
shifted as he was burning Phoebe, right? That's what you would have expected. But no, he had to punch a woman in the face for him. Like, okay.
At the end of the day, we learned the lessons we need to learn. So I guess that's all. I guess that's all they were trying to prove, and clearly did not put enough effort into the rest of the scene.
Yeah, exactly. They were just like, the rest, who cares?
Yeah, whatever. We'll make it look as disgusting as we want.
So then we go to the manor, and apparently they didn't stay at the party. So we have some string music playing. We see Paige is painting, and she's surrounded by candles, a nice fire hazard. And then Piper and Leo are in the kitchen, and they're like eating and drinking wine and being all cute together. And then for our final moment of the episode, we cut to P3, where Cole and Phoebe are dressed up in 40s outfits. Where did they get them? I don't know. And she walks down the stairs and they slow dance and no one else is there. And it's like really cute, but also like, what the fuck? What is happening?
Yeah, definitely a very show thing to do,
Like they
not
just
quite a
wanted to use the
logical.
costumes. Like, I don't understand the purpose of this.
Yeah, it definitely had no logic behind it. Can't really give any explanation for that. But I will say they looked cute, so
They did. They did.
is what
Like
it
they
is.
looked really nice. Like it was a cute scene, but I was also like, is there
Yeah,
a purpose? There's
there's
not.
no logic. I clearly they were just trying to find some sort of final cute closing moment, which, they did, but it doesn't quite add up. But whatever, we didn't make the show. It's so funny because I see it now where like before it was always like, oh yeah, whatever, and now that we're actually analyzing each episode, I feel like I notice so much more than I ever did
Yeah.
before, and so much about it that doesn't actually make sense than I ever have in the past. But I'm sure you see that in any show, I mean,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
it is what it is, but it's just so funny when we get to sit here and talk about it and acknowledge it, because there are some times where I'm watching it and I'm like, well, that doesn't add up, but like I never have anybody to talk to, and now I have this podcast to have that conversation with.
So, final thoughts?
Despite the final scenes being a little inconsistent and not making too much sense to us, I have to say this is definitely a really phenomenal episode, strongly put together. I love everything about each person's development in this episode. It didn't feel like it was particularly trying to show us anyone in particular. It was supposed to kind of show us a little bit of everyone's issues, and I kind of really liked that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I literally texted you this, but just for like our listeners out there, I wasn't really looking forward to this episode. I don't know why. It's not like I like hated this episode or something, but it just wasn't one I was excited about. And as I was watching it, I was like, this is actually a really fucking good episode. Like I enjoyed watching it so much. And like I really like the Cole aspects we get in this episode and kind of the development, whether it's a little toxic, like we've been talking about, but I like that we're seeing more of his personality and who he is as a human beyond the role of Balthazar and just being there to protect and help Phoebe. So I did like seeing more development from him in this episode, what he's struggling with emotionally in terms of their relationship. I liked seeing some more discussion with him and Phoebe on the marriage aspect. I liked seeing Piper kind of sticking her nose in the relationship a little bit because I think we see them butting into her relationship more often. So it was nice to see her kind of doing that to Phoebe the way that Phoebe and Paige have done to her at other points in the season.
I absolutely agree.
And, Paige's reconnection to like her art and her life outside of being a witch, which is something that she has talked about being important to her. So I liked seeing that in this episode as well.
Absolutely. There's so much to enjoy in this episode. There's so much that we see. I don't know that it's aside from the whole marriage and, the whole Phoebe and Cole progression of that, not letting go of the fact that, hey, that's not an easy thing to overcome, the rejection.
Mhm.
But aside from that, it's not like it showed us some crazy amount of like, oh, here's the next thing you're going to look forward to. But it did show us a lot of each character, which I appreciated, I respected. This was never an episode that I've seen as something that's like, oh, one of my favorite episodes of the season or of the whole show, you know what I mean? But I never saw it as one that I didn't enjoy. I knew it was
Yeah.
something that we were going to enjoy talking about and have a lot to say about. So I definitely was looking forward to it. And every time, for some reason, the scene that always sticks out to me is the kitchen scene where Piper kind of explains Phoebe's side of things, and that leads to a lot. And I really enjoyed that, and I found it important personally. So
Yeah.
this was definitely a great episode to me. Definitely one I was like excited to watch and excited to talk about, and it ended up being even more of a discussion than I thought it would be. So very happy about that.
Yeah, me too. And it just reminds me that like season 4 is so good overall. And like there's so much to look forward to still. But even just this aspect of like the demonic factions, I think was something interesting to kind of pick up from the source's injury 2 episodes ago. So I think that that really worked too.
I agree. I mean, has season 4 ever been one that like really stood out for you? Aside from like the whole source aspect of us really getting to know him and, possibly him having becoming our big bad of the season, has this season ever really stood out to you the way it is now? Like to me, it feels like it's becoming one of my favorites,
It's
genuinely.
always been one of my favorite seasons. I think I've always liked seasons 3 and 5 more,
Me
but I
too.
am really loving season 4. So I will say that.
Me too. I think once we get to season 5, I'm gonna love it even more, but I definitely never had the appreciation for this season like I am having now.
No, I definitely am appreciating it so much more. I might have honestly even previously ranked season 1 liking it more than season 4, but I think season 4 is quickly becoming potentially my second, or dare I say it, maybe even my first favorite season. I'll have to wait till we get to the end, but I'm really loving it.
I agree. I'm definitely looking forward to when we do get through all of them and being able to discuss that. But so far, even we're 10 episodes in or 9 episodes in, and I'm feeling like, damn, this season has a lot more than I ever realized it had.
Yeah, and like from a mid-season finale standpoint, like it's killing it. Like there's no way I would stop not come back after the break, you know what I mean?
I definitely agree. Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you want to reach out to us or follow us on social media, we're on Instagram and TikTok at rewitched_pod. Or you can send us an email to rewitched.pod@gmail.com. Either way, we appreciate you listening and hope you'll join us back next time for season 4, episode 10, A Page from the Past.